Welcome to the Irish Revolution. This month we're going to look at the sack of Balbriggan with a few words on the growing fearsomeness among the newly recruited Black and Tans, and finish with a rather strange story with the curious apparition of the Virgin Mary in Templemore, County Tipperary. The biography this month will be about Kevin Barry, an 18-year-old who was captured in an IRA operation gone wrong in Dublin's north inner city. By the summer of 1920, it was clear that things were getting worse in Ireland. The Black and Tans and later the auxiliaries would commit serious atrocities and reprisals against communities all across Ireland. The Hawks in the British cabinet were in the ascendant, possibly because of the belief that they were, quote, winning, unquote. Although I think I made it clear throughout these videos that the British didn't have a clear strategy, so it wasn't obvious what their idea of winning actually was. The Hawks in the cabinet had won sweeping powers with the passing of the Restoration of Order in Ireland Act in August 1920. Even the usually pessimistic General Macready claimed that while there was no marked change in the military situation, that things were turning a corner. There was some amount of self-delusion in this thinking, of course. Hammer Greenwood told Bonar Law that the tide had turned and that the Irish were losing faith in Sinn Féin. Macready agreed with this and also indicated that there had been an improvement in the morale of the army and the police. This self-delusion would come to a head with the now infamous declaration of Lloyd George on 9th November that they had, quote, murder by the throat, unquote. Of course, the events of Kilmichael and Bloody Sunday would reveal this for what it was, but you'll have to wait for November for that. All that said, there was an ongoing public relations nightmare for the British state with the hunger strike of Terence MacSwiney, which became a huge propaganda tool for the Republican side. There was also widespread alarm in the British press about the tactics employed in Ireland by Crown forces. Ireland was, after all, a supposedly integral part of the core British Isles, not some distant colony, and among polite society at least, harsh methods were not cricket. September 1920 saw widespread and indignant coverage of the sack of Balbriggan in both the liberal and conservative press in Ireland. In fact, large parts of the British establishment were horrified by what was going on in Ireland, even among the more conservative elements. The key part of the Hawke strategy was the effective utilisation of reprisals as a policy tool of state terrorism, if I were to put it bluntly. Don't take my word for it. The head of the Imperial Army, General Henry Wilson, recorded the following in his diary on the 23rd of September 1920, quote, at Balbriggan, Turles and Galway yesterday, the local police marked down certain SFs as, in their opinion, the actual murderers or instigators, and then coolly went and shot them without question or trial. Winston saw very little harm in this, but it horrifies me, unquote. If you're wondering who Winston is, it's none other than the big lad himself, Winston Churchill, who was one of the main men responsible for the introduction of the Black and Tans to Ireland. Now, speaking of Balbriggan, on the 21st September 1920, a large party of Black and Tans burst through Balbriggan and looted and burnt many houses and businesses in the town, including a factory. They also killed 2 people. This was a reprisal attack for the killing of a district inspector and a sergeant earlier on the same day. Charles Townshend points out that contrary to the popular imagination, this was not a wild orgy of drunken mayhem. No, this was a controlled exercise of state power. They were led by officers and sergeants, quote, Irishmen all, unquote. The reprisals in the autumn of 1920 were widespread across the country. This month there was also reprisals in Clare, Sligo and Meath. And now for something completely different. On the 16th of August 1920, District Inspector William Wilson was shot by the IRA in Templemore, County Tipperary. That same night, Templemore Town Hall was burnt down by soldiers in reprisal. The next day, reports from the town talked about supernatural cures. The epicentre of these miracles emanated from the Thomas Dwyer newsagent in the town's main street and in a cottage 12 kilometres away in Curraheen. It was reported that the religious statues in the newsagents in the cottage and in nearby RAC barracks were shedding tears of blood. A 16-year-old farm labourer, Jimmy Walsh, claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary and that a holy well had appeared in the floor of his bedroom. The local newspaper reported that after the burning at Templemore Town Hall that a statue had been brought to the town which, according to the local people, had prevented further trouble. A kind of religious mania gripped this part of Tipperary, which was news to me, by the way, as I hadn't heard of this before. Up to 15,000 people per day went there on pilgrimage. Hundreds of people with all kinds of maladies congregated there, hoping to get the cure. Several cures were indeed reported. Sinn Féin tried to police the madness as best they could. The official line of the church, as so often in these cases, was one of extreme scepticism. They did their best to stay out of it, or at least take a back seat. Most interestingly of all, a kind of informal truce between the IRA and the Crown forces took place. The IRA even acted as stewards, attempting to bring some order to the crowds. The local IRA leader, Jimmy Leahy, was very dubious about it, and he wasn't the only one. Dan Breen, another Tipperary IRA leader, concluded that it was hoax. When he informed Michael Collins in Dublin, he seemed amused, accusing Breen of being a man without any religion. Collins had already been contacted by clergy in the area, worried that it was an elaborate ruse invented by the local IRA in order to raise money to buy guns. Collins sent for one of the statues to be brought to him. He smashed it open and found inside an alarm clock connected to a fountain pen inserts filled with sheep's blood. Jimmy Walsh emigrated to Australia soon after. Dan Breen was convinced that he was a spy. Had he remained in Ireland, it's highly probable that he would have been shot. As far as I know, people in Templemore don't like to talk about this strange episode of their history. If there are any Templemoreans watching this, I'd appreciate a bit of local folklore there in the comments. Alright, and the biography this month is about Kevin Barry, who was an 18-year-old medical student who took part in an IRA operation at King's Inn on Dublin's north side. The IRA held up a detachment of soldiers aiming to take their rifles while they were collecting a delivery of bread. Ordinarily, Crown forces in this predicament wouldn't resist, probably knowing that the IRA were always racing the clock and were happy to get what they needed and move on again. However, on this occasion, a British soldier did resist, which led to an altercation. 3 British soldiers were killed and 1 IRA man wounded in the chaos. Within minutes, the Church Street area was overwhelmed by British forces from the nearby North Dublin Union. Barry was taken as prisoner and later executed, becoming a major focus of Republican propaganda in the months that followed. Later in October, the Irish Bulletin, Dáil Éireann's propaganda machine, made use of an affidavit produced by Barry that alleged torture against him with a bayonet. In any case, even if there were no torture involved, Barry's use and his perceived idealism made him a perfect Republican martyr, which he would go on to become. You've probably heard one of the songs at some point. That's it. Thanks very much for watching. See you now. Good luck.